Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night? That cold, creeping feeling twisting in your gut, telling you that the person right there beside you, the woman you care about, is somehow, slowly, becoming a stranger, like the warmth you once knew is chilling over. What if I told you that the most devastating emotional betrayals often don't announce themselves with a dramatic explosion, but begin with a series of quiet whispers, with seemingly innocent, everyday phrases that are actually glaring red flags, silently signaling emotional detachment, subtle manipulation, or even worse, if you're tired of constantly second-guessing your own intuition, if you're ready to finally decode the subtle language that can reveal her true intentions before irreparable damage is done, then consider this video your urgent, unmissable wake-up call. We're about to expose the phrases you simply cannot afford to ignore. That feeling, like the warmth in her voice has noticeably cooled. The familiar sparkle in her eyes seems to be fading, and you just can't quite put your finger on why things feel so profoundly different. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep, head first, into a conversation that, tragically, too many men only have far too late, usually when the emotional damage is already extensive, and the silence between two people has become utterly deafening. You see, cheating, in its many forms, rarely just starts with a physical kiss or a clandestine meeting. More often, it begins insidiously, with emotional distance. It starts with subtle but significant changes in behavior. Those missed calls that become more frequent, conversations that feel shorter and more superficial, a noticeable shift in how you're prioritized in her life, until one day, you might painfully realize you're not even on her list anymore. Emotional detachment is quiet, almost stealthy in its approach, but its consequences, believe me, are devastatingly loud. In this video, we're going to expose 4 key phrases, 4 common utterances that often reveal when a woman is genuinely pulling away from you. And I'm not always talking about physically leaving, at least not initially, but certainly emotionally disengaging. These aren't just random, throwaway comments. They are often distinct red flags, critical warning signs of potential emotional infidelity, subtle manipulation, or even the quiet, calculated planning of a future life that, heartbreakingly, no longer includes you. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about assigning blame or painting anyone as a villain. This is about self-preservation. It's about arming you with the awareness to see what's often hidden in plain sight. And most importantly, it's about giving you the clarity you need and deserve to protect your heart, your peace of mind, and your future. So, if you've ever had that nagging gut feeling that something is fundamentally wrong in your relationship, but you just can't quite explain it or put your finger on it, this video is your essential wake-up call. Watch this until the very end, because what you learn here today could genuinely change the way you see your relationship, and perhaps even yourself, forever. And hey, if you find this content valuable, if you appreciate raw, real talk on difficult subjects, please don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and definitely click that subscribe button. Your support truly helps us keep creating these honest, unfiltered conversations that, frankly, too many people are afraid to have. Alright, let's get straight into it. First up, phrase number 1, the classic, often deceptive, "Oh, he's just a friend." This is a red flag that waves in so many different stories. And it often begins with something seemingly small, something easy to overlook or dismiss. It might be a new name, or perhaps an old one, that starts cropping up in her conversations a little too frequently, a little too casually. It could be a laugh you overhear when she's on the phone, one that sounds slightly too familiar, too intimate for just a friend. Or perhaps it's a story she tells where this same man inexplicably appears. Time and time again, In scenarios where his presence feels a bit off, she'll likely smile, maybe even touch your arm reassuringly, and say those 5 little words, "Don't worry, he's just a friend," and because you want to trust her, because you value the connection you have. Maybe you try to believe it. Perhaps you even tell yourself you're just overthinking things, being unnecessarily jealous or insecure. But you need to understand that underneath those seemingly innocuous words, there's often a much deeper, more complex story unfolding, a story that often has far less to do with genuine platonic friendship and much more to do with subtle emotional positioning and boundary testing. It's really a truly casual statement when a woman feels the need to insistently explain why another man in her life is supposedly nothing for you to worry about. Often, that explanation feels rehearsed, almost strategic. She might go out of her way to make him sound completely harmless. Maybe she'll emphasize that he's gay, or he's already happily married, or perhaps they've known each other since kindergarten. They're practically siblings, or she'll lean heavily on the old classic, "Oh, please, he's like a brother to me." These details, these justifications, are often chosen not to genuinely make you feel secure, but rather to allow her to keep him close, to maintain that connection without facing direct confrontation from you. The more concerted effort she puts into defending this friendship, the more you absolutely must ask yourself, and perhaps her, why she feels such a compelling need to explain it so vehemently. If this man were truly irrelevant to your relationship, if the connection was purely platonic and transparent, she likely wouldn't need to justify his presence at all, would she? But instead, if you pay close attention, you'll often start to notice certain patterns emerging. She might bring him up in conversation when it's not really necessary or relevant. She might laugh a little louder, a little more unguardedly, when she reads his texts. She may even, counterintuitively, encourage you to meet him, perhaps hoping that your discomfort will magically disappear if you like him as a person. But often, it doesn't. Your instincts, that gut feeling we talked about, start to pick up on how fiercely she protects that specific connection, sometimes alarmingly, even more fiercely than she protects her connection with you. The real test, the moment of truth, often lies in how she responds when you genuinely
respectfully express your concerns about this friendship. If she becomes immediately dismissive, if she gets defensive, or if she even turns angry and accuses you of being controlling or insecure, it's often not because your concerns are baseless. It's frequently because you're uncomfortably close to uncovering something she hasn't yet fully admitted. Perhaps even to herself. A woman who is truly, deeply in love with you, a woman who genuinely values your emotional well-being, will typically take your feelings of insecurity or concern very seriously. She won't demand that you tolerate something that consistently makes you feel uneasy or threatened within your own relationship. She won't usually insist on keeping someone closely in her orbit if she knows it's actively damaging the foundation of trust and security between you. But when she does the opposite, when she steadfastly refuses to create any distance, when she consistently invalidates your legitimate concerns, or worse, when she tries to gaslight you into believing that you're the one being unreasonably insecure or jealous, then it's absolutely time to step back. Take a deep breath and see what's really happening beneath the surface. Emotional boundaries, you see, are often far more complicated to define and defend than physical ones, primarily because there's often nothing overtly obvious to point to. No clear line crossed in a tangible way, but that doesn't make them any less real, any less important. Emotional infidelity, that subtle siphoning off of emotional intimacy, often begins not with a grand, dramatic betrayal, but with loyalty, attention, and connection being quietly, gradually, shifted elsewhere. You'll notice the signs if you're willing to see them, frequent, often secretive, texting with him, that specific kind of laughter at her phone when there's no shared context with you, messages she quickly deletes or hides before you might have a chance to ask about them. Sometimes, it's her sharing private, intimate details about your relationship, your struggles, your private moments. With him, it's her confiding in him about things she no longer brings to you. Her primary partner. This is not harmless. This is not just friendship. This is emotional intimacy, the lifeblood of your relationship, being steadily transferred, one text, one shared secret, one inside joke at a time. And the worst part is, sometimes she may not even fully realize the extent of what she's doing, or the damage it's causing, or perhaps, more troublingly, maybe she does realize it, and simply doesn't want to stop. It's tragically not uncommon for these kinds of just a friend relationships to conveniently evolve into something more romantic, often very shortly after the current primary relationship ends. It happens so frequently, in fact, that it's almost no longer surprising to those who have seen it play out. The stories are everywhere. I recall one instance where, for years, a man watched his girlfriend fiercely defend her incredibly close bond with a male friend. Every single one of his concerns, no matter how gently voiced, was met with her laughter, her irritation, or accusations of his insecurity. But only a few short months after they finally broke up, she was officially in a committed relationship with that very same man. Eventually, they even got married. The man who was supposedly just a friend, the one she claimed was like a brother, had evidently been quietly waiting in the wings, biding his time, and she, whether consciously or not, had kept the door wide open for him the entire time. This is the uncomfortable, often painful, truth that many men don't want to face. The words, "he's just a friend," are not always an outright lie, but they are very often an incomplete, misleading truth. If she's willing to consistently risk your trust, your peace of mind, to keep another man closely in her orbit, she's arguably not choosing you fully, not prioritizing your relationship. If she gets defensive and accusatory instead of being empathetic and reassuring, if she dismisses your valid concerns instead of actively addressing them, then it's often not about her commitment to your love, but rather about her divided emotional loyalty. And love that is divided, gentlemen, is love that is inherently weakened. There's an old saying that fits here perfectly: you don't compete with a friend. You compete with someone she hasn't been entirely honest about. When a woman's primary emotional energy, her deepest confidences, her most unguarded moments, are consistently being given to another man, often covertly, you're not just imagining the shift in your relationship, you're living in the cold reality of it. A partner who truly values you, who is fully invested in your shared future, will make you feel like you are more than enough. She won't consistently make you feel like there's someone else quietly waiting in the background, a silent contender, while she expects you to just act like everything's perfectly normal. Trust isn't built on how often someone tells you, "Don't worry." It's built on their consistent, demonstrated willingness to protect what matters to you, to safeguard your emotional well-being, especially when no one else is watching. And if she won't protect your heart from the unsettling presence of someone who clearly threatens its peace, then just a friend might indeed be just the beginning of a much bigger, more painful truth. This leads us to phrase number 2, the destructive dance of gaslighting and deflecting accountability. There are those moments in any relationship, aren't there, when something just doesn't feel quite right. You sense a subtle shift in the dynamic, an unfamiliar tone in her voice, a noticeable hesitation in her answers, or perhaps a story she tells that just doesn't quite add up, leaving you with a knot of unease in your stomach. You decide to bring it up, perhaps gently, tentatively, unsure if you're just overthinking things or being overly sensitive. But instead of receiving clarity, understanding, or reassurance, you're met with a wall of deflection. Suddenly, almost inexplicably, you become the problem. You're the one being insecure. You're the one who's overreacting. What you thought was going to be a calm, constructive conversation transforms into a bewildering courtroom drama, and somehow you find yourself on trial, being cross-examined for the very thing you were initially, and perhaps justifiably, questioning. This, gentlemen, isn't just a simple miscommunication or a misunderstanding. It's often a deliberate psychological maneuver. When she consistently makes you doubt your own instincts, when she makes you feel guilty or foolish for noticing legitimate red flags, she's not genuinely addressing the issue at hand. She's skillfully, perhaps even unconsciously, dodging it. Think about that moment you might have caught her sitting just a little too close to another man, or when you saw a text message pop up on her phone that felt undeniably off. That sent a shiver down your spine. What you felt in that moment, your initial intuitive reaction, was likely valid, but her subsequent response, her deflection or counter-accusation, effectively turns the spotlight onto your reaction, rather than her questionable behavior. It's a subtle, often insidious, rewriting of the truth, and is designed to make you shrink, to make you doubt your own sanity, to make you back down. That, in essence, is gaslighting. It's not always loud or overtly cruel, but it is always profoundly confusing and emotionally eroding. Sometimes, it goes even further. You voice a genuine concern, and she expertly flips the entire situation onto you. Maybe you're the one who's cheating, she might say, her voice laced with accusation. Why else would you even think something like that about me? This isn't just a defensive tactic, it's often a calculated projection. Instead of simply answering your question or addressing your concern directly and honestly, she plants a seed of suspicion in your direction, attempting to put you on the defensive. It's an effective, if damaging, way of pushing you off balance while simultaneously avoiding any semblance of accountability for her own actions or choices. You end up second-guessing yourself, questioning your own perceptions, not because you were actually wrong, but because she's become skilled at making you feel like you are. And then, of course, come the stories that conveniently shift and change over time. One day, she tells you it was a girls-only night out. The next week, someone else casually mentions that a particular guy was there with their group. When you ask her about the discrepancy, she brushes it off with a dismissive wave of her hand. Oh, don't be silly, you're reading way too much into it. But your gut, that internal compass, knows better, doesn't it? It's often in these seemingly minor contradictions, these little inconsistencies, that the truth begins to leak out. These inconsistencies aren't always dramatic, bombshell revelations, but they matter immensely because, over time, they systematically wear down your confidence in your own perception of reality. You gradually start ignoring those persistent whispers of your intuition, choosing instead to accept the often convenient explanations she hands you. But you absolutely need to remember this: your intuition, that deep inner knowing, rarely lies, especially when it comes to matters of the heart and trust. When something consistently feels off, it usually is off. You don't always need every single detail to align perfectly, every piece of evidence laid out like a legal case, to trust your own instincts. There's a reason you felt the need to ask in the first place. There's a reason her answers didn't quite sit right with you. Your peace of mind is far too valuable to be continuously chipped away by a barrage of half-truths, deflections, and manipulative blame games. There's a quiet, unshakable power in standing firmly by what you intuitively know to be true, even, and especially, when someone you care about is actively trying to rewrite the story to suit their own narrative. As the old saying goes, if your spirit is unsettled, there's a reason. And no matter how much she might try to twist the truth or confuse the issue, your clarity, your path back to solid ground, begins the moment you stop doubting yourself and start trusting that inner voice. This leads us to what often follows such patterns of deflection and emotional distancing. And remember, that clarity, that path back to trusting your own judgment after facing gaslighting or deflection, begins the very moment you stop doubting your inner voice. This often leads us to another common and deeply unsettling phrase, our phrase number 3, the deceptively soft exit strategy, often veiled as "I need space." When a woman utters these 3 words, "I need space," it rarely, if ever, arrives completely out of the blue, without preceding warning signs you might have initially dismissed. The words themselves might sound gentle, even thoughtful, almost as if she's responsibly stepping back to work on herself, to find some personal clarity, or to recenter, but more often than not, gentlemen, the space she's asking for isn't destined to be empty. In many cases, it's already being mentally, emotionally, or even physically filled by someone or something else. This phrase is, without a doubt, one of the most misunderstood and frequently used soft exit strategies in modern relationships. On the surface, it can feel like a temporary pause, a moment to breathe, perhaps even a chance for both of you to reset and come back stronger. But in truth, it's often a carefully, almost strategically, phrased way to soften the brutal reality that she's already in the process of emotionally detaching, of creating a gentle off-ramp from the relationship. What she frames as a quest for personal growth or quiet reflection is, far too often, a subtle doorway she's prying open, not primarily to find herself, but to quietly explore the possibility of welcoming someone new into her life, often without the discomfort of fully and definitively letting go of you just yet. If you watch her behavior closely during this need for space, the signs usually become undeniable. The texts, if they come at all, arrive less frequently now, and their tone is often noticeably cooler, more distant. Phone calls that once comfortably stretched late into the night, filled with laughter and intimacy, become short, perfunctory, almost practical. She might begin to avoid physical closeness, not necessarily out of acute stress or a specific grievance, but more out of a palpable, growing disinterest. You'll likely notice her spending more and more time with new friends, or perhaps old ones you barely know, and her overall energy, her focus, seems to subtly but surely shift towards people and places that conspicuously don't include you. That one particular male name might even start to appear more often than before in her casual mentions, usually followed by a quick, dismissive, "Oh, he's just a friend." But you can feel the shift, can't you? You sense it in the changing cadence of her words, in the growing absence of genuine emotional intimacy. This is precisely where many well-meaning men falter badly. They react with panic, they chase, they beg, they send long, pleading messages. They desperately try to prove they're worth staying for, that the relationship is worth fighting for. But here's a hard truth. Chasing someone who is already consciously, deliberately walking away only serves to make the distance between you grow wider, faster. She isn't typically asking for space to heal the relationship with you. More often, she's asking for it to road test life without you, while perhaps keeping the door to you slightly ajar, just in case her other prospects don't pan out as she hopes. In her manufactured silence and her calculated absence, she's often keenly watching how you respond. The more desperately you reach out, the more frantically you try to bridge that gap, the less she typically respects your center, your self-possession. The strongest, most self-respecting response in this situation usually isn't to argue, to plead, or to launch into lengthy explanations of your worth. It's to honor the space she's requested, completely and without immediate chase, Step back, not out of anger or punitive silence, but out of profound self-respect. Let her actions, or inactions, during this period clearly reveal her true intent. If she genuinely uses that space to build a life that clearly moves away from you, to grow closer to someone else, or to simply drift further into her own world without you, then the truth was never really in her words about needing space for herself. It was always in the emotional and physical distance she deliberately created. There's immense wisdom and quiet power in such restraint. A man who can remain grounded, centered, and focused on his own life while someone he cares for drifts away isn't being passive. He's being incredibly powerful. Eventually, if she's not genuinely working towards a resolution with you, she'll likely realize that the space she asked for became the deafening silence where your validating presence, your comforting attention, simply disappeared, and in that silence, away from your influence, she might finally see what she truly walked away from, not just a man who loved her, but a man who possessed the self-respect and wisdom to know when to stop giving himself to someone who had, for all intents and purposes, already let go. This often leads to the painful, but clarifying, phrase number 4, the seemingly altruistic, "You deserve someone better." This, gentlemen, is often the final signal. There's a specific moment in some breakups, or the lead up to them, that feels more profoundly confusing and disorienting than purely heartbreaking. She sits across from you, perhaps quietly, maybe with a carefully constructed look of regret or a practiced, almost serene calm, and she utters words that, on the surface, sound like a compliment, like an act of selfless concern. But they land with the definitive thud of a final verdict: "You deserve someone better." Or, "You deserve to be happier than I can make you." The words are often delivered softly, gently, almost as if she's doing you an immense kindness, handing you a difficult truth that, in her mind, should somehow make you feel grateful or understood. But you need to understand that underneath the polished, almost noble-sounding sentence, there's typically a quiet, irreversible unraveling of something already long broken. And the real message, the one she's not saying aloud, the one she hopes you won't press her on, is usually far less noble, far more self-serving. It often translates to, "I've already emotionally, and perhaps even physically, left this relationship. Please, don't make this breakup harder or messier than it needs to be for me." When a woman says those specific words, she's almost always already gone. Maybe not physically out the door yet, not officially broken up in the eyes of the world, but emotionally, mentally, she has checked out. She's no longer truly in the room with you, sharing the same relational space. The warmth you once knew has definitively faded. Her very presence has shifted, and something in her tone now carries an unmistakable distance instead of genuine care or connection. You'll likely start to notice, or perhaps you already have, how the conversations between you grow shorter, more perfunctory, how direct eye contact becomes a rarity, how her touch, if it happens at all, feels more like a distant habit, a muscle memory, than a genuine expression of connection. She's already withdrawn from the relationship in her heart and mind, and what you're hearing now isn't really a conversation or a negotiation. It's often the carefully crafted closing line of her internal script. This phrase, "You deserve someone better," is undeniably one of the cleanest, most effective emotional exit strategies she can possibly use. Why? Because it cleverly positions her on the moral high ground while simultaneously protecting her from feelings of guilt or the burden of a difficult explanation. Instead of having to say the hard, honest things like, "I've lost interest in you," or "I've met someone else," or "I'm no longer willing to work on this," she says, "No, you deserve more." It's a statement but artfully frames you as the potential victim of a decision that she is making. supposedly with your best interests and profound compassion at heart. But in truth, she's often simply asking for a smooth, uncomplicated exit, one preferably without messy confrontations, without uncomfortable, probing questions, and certainly without having to explain or justify choices she may not want to admit. Especially if she's already emotionally or physically involved with someone else, this phrase allows her to attempt to move forward without carrying the full, immediate weight of causing pain or betrayal. She subtly gives you the appearance of agency, of this being somehow for your benefit, while she firmly controls the direction and the ultimate outcome of the situation. This tactic often works because it so effectively flips the emotional script. Suddenly, in your mind, you're not the one being left or rejected. You're being generously offered freedom, a chance at something better. She frames the impending breakup as a selfless gift to you, rather than what it often is, an escape for her. And it can work exceptionally well if you're still deeply invested, still trying to make things work, hopeful and perhaps blissfully unaware of just how far gone she truly is emotionally. You might even find yourself responding with initial confusion, or perhaps even a misguided sense of gratitude, not fully realizing that what's happening is a carefully worded maneuver designed to shift the emotional labor, the bad guy role of the breakup squarely onto your shoulders, or at least away from hers. Many men, understandably, make the critical mistake of trying to fix things at this precise point. They hear, "You deserve someone better," and think, maybe she's just tired, or confused, or she needs more reassurance from me. They might then offer to do better, to communicate more effectively, to change whatever aspects of themselves they believe might have pushed her away. But when a woman delivers this line, it usually means she has already mentally rehearsed her exit countless times. She is typically not asking for solutions or improvements to the relationship. She's asking for closure, preferably without the associated mess, drama, or accountability. Trying to win her back at this stage isn't usually a display of strength or commitment. It's often a painful delay of the inevitable and, sadly, a slow, steady erosion of your own dignity. The right move, though it may feel incredibly counterintuitive in the moment, is powerful in its simplicity. You let her go. You let her go without begging, without bargaining, without demanding the whole, convoluted story, because the unvarnished truth is already there, hanging heavy in the silence behind her carefully chosen words. She's no longer emotionally invested, and she likely wants you to make the ending easier for her. Your calm acceptance of her decision, in this context, isn't a sign of loss or weakness on your part. It's an act of profound self-respect. It's demonstrating an understanding that if someone truly valued you, if they genuinely wanted to be with you, they wouldn't be leaving you under the guise of helping you find someone better. They would stay, they would communicate, they would face the discomfort and do the hard work of trying to resolve the issues together. There's an old, wise saying worth remembering here: when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. In this particular case, when she tells you that you deserve someone better, don't misinterpret it as an act of profound humility or selfless love on her part. Read it, more often than not, as her polite, indirect way of asking to be released from a role in your life that she no longer wants to play. And the sooner you can recognize that painful truth, the sooner you can stop holding on to someone who has, in all meaningful ways, already let go. Healing, true healing, begins not when you desperately chase closure from someone else, but when you bravely choose clarity for yourself. And that clarity often comes when you understand that real, authentic love doesn't typically end with a carefully constructed catchphrase dressed up as compassion. It either fights with courage and commitment to stay, or it has the integrity to walk away honestly and directly. Anything else is frequently just a carefully worded, self-protective goodbye. So, let's bring this all together. Don't settle for half-hearted effort or ambiguous intentions. Cheating, at its emotional core, is rarely an impulsive, out-of-the-blue act. It's not usually something that just happens suddenly, without any preceding warning signs. More often, it's a gradual, insidious unraveling of emotional connection, a slow erosion of loyalty, and a diminishing of mutual respect. And as we've seen throughout this discussion, it often begins with those small, seemingly innocent phrases that many men, unfortunately, overlook or misinterpret until it's far too late. He's just a friend. You're just being insecure. I need space. And, of course, you deserve someone better. These aren't just words, gentlemen. They are potent cues. They are often clear signals that something significant, something unsettling, has shifted beneath the surface of your relationship. When a woman begins to truly disconnect emotionally, the very language she uses often changes. Her behavior typically becomes more guarded, her physical and emotional presence more distant, and her reassurances, if offered at all, start to feel hollow, almost rehearsed. She may not admit her detachment directly, not in plain, unambiguous terms, but she often tells you exactly what you need to know if you're willing to truly listen. Not just to her words, but to her actions, her energy, and the unspoken messages between the lines. This entire situation is so profoundly painful for so many men precisely because of the dual sting of betrayal and the subsequent, gut-wrenching realization that they likely ignored their own intuition for far too long. They questioned their gut feelings. They tried to be more understanding, more accommodating. They gave more chances than were perhaps warranted, and they often made excuses, both to themselves and to others, for behavior and emotional distances that they deep down knew to be true and troubling. But emotional infidelity and the subtle patterns of detachment that often lead to it rarely correct themselves without direct, honest intervention, and even then, the path back is arduous, if not impossible. Once genuine respect is lost, once another person begins to consistently occupy significant emotional space in her heart and mind, the relationship you once cherished is, in all likelihood, no longer the same. Now, this isn't about universally blaming women, nor is it about encouraging a default state of distrust in all relationships. Far from it, it's about learning to listen more acutely, more perceptively, to what's often left unsaid, to the subtle nuances of communication and behavior. A woman who is still genuinely emotionally committed to you and to the relationship will typically do everything in her power to protect that bond, to honor your boundaries, to prioritize your feelings, and to communicate openly and honestly, even when it's difficult. But when she begins to consistently use language that deflects accountability, that manipulates through guilt, or that seeks space without offering genuine clarity or a path towards reconnection, it's very often a clear sign that she's already started the process of emotionally exiting the relationship, whether she fully admits it to herself or to you. And here's a fundamental truth you need to internalize: you are not responsible for convincing someone to stay with you if they are determined to leave. You are not meant to beg for love, for loyalty, or for the basic clarity you deserve. When a person consistently shows signs of emotional detachment, especially through vague phrases, defensive behavior, or unexplained distance, it's not your job to decode their cryptic messages or to single-handedly fix whatever is broken for them. Observing these patterns, assessing the reality of the situation with clear eyes, and decisively protecting your own emotional well-being, that is your job. Staying in a clearly one-sided relationship, clinging to the hope that your love alone will magically bring him back or change their heart, only serves to prolong your own pain and significantly delay your healing process. A man of true value, A man of self-respect does not endlessly chase half-hearted affection. He does not tolerate persistent ambiguity, nor does he allow himself to be endlessly strung along by someone whose heart and mind are clearly elsewhere. Instead, he learns to move with quiet confidence, with dignity, walking away from what no longer serves his growth or his peace. And in doing so, making necessary space in his life for genuine peace, for profound clarity, and for future, healthier growth. That, gentlemen, is true strength, not anger, not revenge, but the powerful, self-possessed ability to detach with dignity when a situation calls for it. So, as we close this important conversation, I want you to ask yourself, honestly and deeply, are you currently accepting less than what you truly deserve in your relationship? Are you perhaps hoping that her ambiguous words mean something entirely different? Something more positive than what her actions and your intuition are strongly implying? And if so, are you finally ready to choose your own self-respect over persistent confusion and emotional pain? I'd genuinely love to hear your story, your experiences. Have you ever been on the receiving end of phrases like the ones we've discussed today? What was your initial gut reaction? How did those experiences shape you, or ultimately strengthen you? How did they shift the way you see yourself, or the kind of people you now choose to let into your world? Please, drop your experience in the comments below. Raw, honest, unfiltered, your story matters. You never know who out there needs to hear your voice, your perspective, to feel less alone in their own struggle. Sometimes, sharing your pain, your journey, can become someone else's guiding light. And if this video sparks something significant in you, if it helps you see the game for what it truly is, or perhaps reminded you of your own intrinsic value, please don't just scroll away. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you turn on notifications, because we're truly just getting started here. There's so much more to uncover about emotional mastery, high-value living, and building the kind of unshakable self-worth that no one can take from you. This is more than just a channel. We're building a movement for men who are done chasing, done settling, and absolutely ready to rise. Until next time, guard your mind, honor your heart, and walk through this world like a man who knows exactly who he is and what he deserves.